All right, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for attending this week's listening session. My name is Charles Rodriguez. I'm a Community Involvement Coordinator with US EPA, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. I want to give thanks to the Way Station and also to the First United Presbyterian Church for allowing us to use their space. The purpose of this event is to present information to the community and answer your questions. The topic of this week is all about water, and it's presented by the Columbiana County Health District. Before we begin, just a couple of reminders. If you have a cell phone, please put it on silent. And tonight's event is going to be a two-part. The first part is a presentation by the county, and afterwards we'll have a question and answer session. And so if you have any questions, during the presentation, please hold off until the Q&A session. Members of the press, thank you for attending. We will have people available for you to talk to after the event. And without further ado, we'll begin the presentations. Presentations from Laura Fauss and also Kevin Summerville from the Columbiana County Health District.
There we go. Thanks, Charles. So my name's Laura Fauss, Columbiana County Health District. I'm the program manager at the Health District in charge of the water well and sewage program, also the public information officer. That's why I'm here today. So I have a little presentation about our drinking water sampling program that we're having here in East Palestine. So I wanted to talk first just a little bit about the difference between municipal water and the private water wells. I know sometimes there's a little bit of a question, so I want to go over that briefly. Municipal water wells are covered by the Ohio EPA, and so that's what a lot of the drinking water in East Palestine is, where that comes from. Your water bill, right? So the difference between that and private water wells are actually on site at your property. And so here's an example, if you can see, of a private water well. It draws water in from the aquifer into the pressure tank into your home. So typically only one resident per well is the way that operates, differently than municipal water supply, which would serve thousands of people possibly. The other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the difference between surface and groundwater. It's a little hard to see on the slide, but I know there's a lot of questions between surface and groundwater. So surface water, like Leslie Run, what we see there by the park, that would be, this is a pointer. That would be in this area here. So you see the surface water, and that is typically not connected to the groundwater. Deep groundwater aquifers where we pull our water supply from the private wells, which would be this example here. You can see this aquifer here, and then there's a layer of clay or some consolidated material that stops the shallow water from getting to it, or filters it very slowly. And then there are also shallow wells, dug wells, older wells with unknown construction in the area. I know we have a lot of residents that have older wells. And so an example here, this is an old kind of hand pump well. Some residents have point-driven wells possibly. Those could be shallower and they could be closer to the connection with the surface water. So that's why it's important that we're doing the sampling program, because we don't know if contamination may have gotten into the shallower aquifers or possibly deeper aquifers. As of right now, we've not seen anything like that, but ongoing sampling is important. Okay, so I have a little timeline here. You guys have lived this, so I'm going to be brief. But basically, we started talking to the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Department of Health pretty much right after the derailment, talking about what are we going to do with water sampling, because we knew it was going to be a problem. We began actually sampling the private water wells on February 12th. We sampled the municipal supply on February 10th, right? And let's see what else. There we go. So then we initially were just targeting the areas about a quarter mile from the derailment, because that was the area that was close to where the chemicals and everything were. And then we expanded that area, and that was based on surface water, groundwater information that we had. We started getting final sample results on February 24th. Those sample results are coming back quicker now. Our second round of sampling began March 13th. We are right now on our third round of sampling, and we're still adding first round samples with some residents that may not have gotten signed up. So we also have increased our priority zone area, and I'll go over that in a little bit with this map. So this gives you kind of an idea of how the sampling has evolved. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is how we're co-sampling with Norfolk Southern. So the consultant right now that Norfolk Southern is working with is called Stantec, and we go out with Santek and do co-sampling. So we're sampling right hand in hand with them. We take all of our samples to a separate laboratory, and they use their laboratory. So you're getting separate results from us, and that is a good thing because you get double the results. We're making sure that everything is results coming back accurately. The other thing that we'd like to talk about, Kevin, is our, Kevin is doing sampling actually on site, so he brought some of the bottleware, so if you want to talk briefly about that, and then we can move through to more of the drinking water sampling program.
So when we come out to do the sampling, we sample a set, and we're sampling for volatile organic chemicals and then semi-volatile. So we have a couple different bottles that we do that with. We use the ambers. We sample in duplicate. So we have 2 ambers that are unpreserved that the lab will run for certain analytes. And then we have 2 other bottles that have preservative in it. Certain chemicals need to be preserved, so that's added, at the lab. We get it. They run it under a different sweep method. And then we also have the vials that we use. So we have 2 sets of vials, and these are used to test for the volatile organics. We get that. They're a little bit different. There could be no airspace, so when we do that, we have to ensure that there's a meniscus on the top. No airspace is left, so in transport and while it's waiting to be ran for the chemicals, that nothing volatilizes, gets into the airspace, and then it's not an accurate test. So there's 2 sets of those. The one has preservative, both of them actually have preservative in it, and then we have to ensure that the other one goes down to a pH of less than 2 to keep the chemicals that we're looking for in solution, in the form that we can test for them. So we do that. We sample right behind Stantec, flush the well for 15 minutes, make sure it's not what's been sitting in the pressure tank, getting it directly from the well, take some readings, let it stabilize, and then they sample, then we sample behind it. So that's the thing, and then a couple other things. There's some other check methods there. We do duplicate, where they don't know where we pulled it from. We give it to the lab. There's no time on it. They run it, and we ensure that it matches the other set that it was pulled from. Same exact sample, basically. And then we do some spikes where the lab will add surrogates to it, and then make sure that they recover at the proper percentage. And there's trip blanks and temp blanks, other things that go with the coolers, go back with it, ensure that the samples were handled properly, and there's just a lot of checks with the process.
Thanks, Kelly. So samples to date, I made this PowerPoint yesterday. This is, we've taken 398 total private drinking water samples. In Ohio, we are only sampling in Columbiana County. Stantec has sampled in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, and I think a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 out of county. To break those down, 230 first round samples, 135 second round samples, and like I said, we just started on the 17th at our third round sampling. We still are accepting water sample requests if you're in the priority zones, which again I'll get to in just a minute. This is the same phone number that we've been advertising from the beginning, so if you're in the priority zone and interested, you can still call that number to get on the list. The way that happens is Stantec schedules you, and then we come out with them, so you don't call us directly. And then if you're outside of the priority zone, and there's a handout here that has more information about that, if you're outside of the priority zone and you're interested in having your water sample, we recommend that you use a certified lab through the Ohio EPA. They have a list of certified laboratories on their website. So that website is on the handout that I provided. Okay, so priority zones. There is a map up here that you can look at later, and we can go over if you want. If you want to look up close. But what we basically have right now is 3 priority zones. The first 2, everybody's pretty familiar with already. Zone 1, East Palestine is right here. This is where the derailment occurred. Zone 2 runs down 170 to Negley. And then more recently, like I mentioned, Zone 3 is the 1 mile radius. That would have been where the evacuation area occurred. So we're sampling in all 3 of those locations now. The 4th location is down the, I'm not sure what all this is, Leslie Run, and then whatever it turns into as it heads south to the Ohio River. And this is a zoomed out version of that. So it actually loops into Pennsylvania a little bit and heads all the way down to the Ohio River. That is a 250-foot buffer from that stream. And so I don't think there are a lot of residents involved in that, but if you're in that area and you're close, you can give us a call and we can try to confirm if you're in that area or not. So chemicals of concern. There's a lot of questions about this and what we're testing for. Like I'm in the way everywhere I stand. So initially we started testing 180 chemicals because we didn't really know what we needed to test for. We didn't really know what was on the train. We didn't have a good idea of what was going on. So we had a large list of chemicals that we were testing for. Some of those included things like caffeine, if you had a first round sample, or permethrin, different things that definitely weren't related to the derailment because of the laboratory methods that we were using to test. Those were included in those samples. Now we have a better idea of what we need to test for because of the air, water, soil, and sediment samples that have occurred and the list of components that were on the train. So we narrowed that down to 29 chemicals of concern that we're testing for. And again, that started on the 17th when we started our 3rd round sampling. So I do have some information about our lab reports that we'll go over because I know it's difficult for residents to read and understand what they're seeing on those lab reports. When we get our final results, the first thing we do, I contact every resident to let them know what that report is. So if you might have talked to me on the phone, you had a detection, you had no detection, this is what your detection might have been. I go over that, I talk about what's considered a safe level in your water of whatever detection you may have gotten or not. Once I've contacted all those residents, then we set those final reports on our website. Again, the link is in the handout that I have. So all of those are available. They are de-identified, but you can look through all that information on our website. We also send the report along with a letter and some other information to the resident, so they have a written copy or by email however they prefer. So help with interpretation is the big question. And so we heard you and we came up with a resource guide, which is also there and available on our website that kind of has some terms that you may not be familiar with if you don't look at laboratory reports very often. So if you have additional questions about your report, we always recommend that you contact us. Some of the chemicals are difficult to pronounce, so ideally if you can come in, make an appointment to come in, sit down with your report, and I can look right at it and say, this is what you've got, and this is what this means. If you have to do it over the phone, that's totally fine, but we're here to go over those results and answer any questions that you have. Stantec also has an email address that you can contact if you have additional questions about their report. We can look at their report too, that's not a problem, but this is a second resource for you to use. And then always the Welcome Center, which a lot of the people here, staff, they're great and they can answer questions or get answers for you if they're not experts and don't know, what the answer might be. So these are the options that we have for you. We really want to make sure the resident feels comfortable in their home and has all the answers that we can provide to them. And so again, we're in Lisbon. We've been here forever. You guys know us through COVID, probably, unfortunately. And so we're here for you and we want to answer those questions. We don't get a lot of calls, so I think maybe because we're not in town, you kind of maybe don't remember us, but you can definitely give us a call anytime, okay? Okay, so here is a lab report. This is the most recent lab report with the only 29 analytes listed. And I'm going to go over just some things for you to look at briefly. I don't want to bore you if you're not into this, but if you look at one of the reports on our website, it's like 70 pages and it has a whole bunch of information. So, those reports are everything that we've tested for that entire day. So that's why there's so much information. This is just one ID sample. So when you're looking at the larger report, the first thing you want to do is make sure you're looking at the analytical report at the top. That's where the results are. There's a lot of information in these reports, but those are the pages that actually have the results. The second thing that you want to look at is the client ID sample. That's the de-identified number that's specific to the property, right? So if you've had your water sample, you can always call us and ask what your sample ID number is. If you don't know, it's on the report that we send too, right? And so then after that, so you're sure you're looking at the right one, down on the left-hand column are the lists of the chemicals that they're testing for. And the big thing that you want to look at is the surrogate. There's a lot of questions here about the surrogates. Those are like tests of tests. You can see with the result column, these are all non-detects. And then you start seeing numbers with a surrogate, and a lot of times residents think that that means that that's in their water. But really what that is the lab's testing to make sure that they're to be able to detect something similar to the chemical that they're testing for. So I know that can be confusing, but yeah, that's what that means.
Can you word that a different way? That doesn't make any sense. Say that one more time.
So the surrogates are a test of the test to make sure that what they're testing for, in this case pyrene here, which was non-detect, these are chemicals that are similar to pyrene that they test for to make sure that they're actually getting readings. So they get the reading and say, okay, so this pyrene is an accurate test. Does that make more sense? It's a check. One of the checks that the lab does. Okay. But it's confusing because it's listed under as a result. But again, that doesn't mean that it's in your water. The other thing that we've gotten questions, again, this is our report, not Stantec's. They use a separate lab. But on Stantec's report, the few that I've seen, instead of ND, meaning non-detect, they have a less than and then a number. So less than 0.01. That doesn't mean that there was a detection. That means they were not able to read anything down to 0.01 or whatever that number is. So that can be a little confusing too for some of the residents.
So the pyrene, then the surrogates underneath it is just looking for the pyrene.
It's not pyrene, but it's a chemical similar to pyrene. So they're just testing for, and I'm not going to try to say it, 1,2-dimethyl-2-trobazine, maybe? So they test for this, and they say, yeah, I was able to detect it, and that's similar to this. And so we know that this test is accurate. We can talk more.
Yeah, so Russ, actually,
use the mic. Sorry, we're recording the meeting tonight, so we want other folks to hear.
Yeah, so Russ, what we do with these, what they do at the laboratory is they spike the matrix. So if it's soil, if it's water, whatever the matrix is, they spike it with a known chemical contaminant, and then they analyze the sample to see if they can see that chemical in a certain range, right? So when you see a range,
I got you.
yeah, percent recovery, yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And so another thing that you might want to look at in the report is the PQL. That's the detection. That's the limit that the lab can actually report at. So they're able to test down to, and I can't read these because they're a little blurry, but like 0.090, I don't know, whatever that says. That they were able to test down to that, and it was non-detected, that number. So that's something that some residents might be interested to look at. So this is 3 pages. I zoomed in so we might be able to see it a little easier. This is the second half of the first page. Again, it has additional analytes that they're testing for and results. This one was all non-detect that I chose to show today. Okay, and this is the third one. I believe that, the qualifier, that's the other thing, that I wanted to talk about. Some of these you'll see that there's a qualifier. This qualifier is listed, and there's a key to the qualifiers in the report that kind of explains that. And then I also have some information about qualifiers in the resource document that we put out. those qualifiers give you a little more information about the test that they did, that maybe something with the checks and balances that the lab did might have been off, high or low, and so a result may have been a little different than what we might have expected. So that's something that you want to look at too, especially if you have a detection. I put all three of these on here in case anybody had questions about what we're testing for now, and I'm sorry that it's not really easy to read. I tried to blow it up as big as we can, but again, these are all available on our website, so if you're interested in getting a third-party test and you want to know what you should have tested for, my recommendation is you pull one of those lab reports off of our website and you talk to the lab about these are the things they're testing for, what is best for me. Okay, so I tried to be brief because I know there's a lot of questions. How do we want to go about questions?
Yeah, so thank you, Laura and Kevin, for the presentation. So yeah, we're gonna open it up for questions. Before we begin, most questions are gonna fall within two categories. One, questions directly related to the presentation. We would like to get to those questions first, and then we can get to other topics. So if anybody has a question about this presentation, raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone. We'll start over there. And ask your question with the microphone. We're recording the meeting. We'll have a video of this recording on the EPA website. If you don't know where to find the website, we have a newsletter. We have copies available on this table right here. We have the website, and it'll take a couple days to process the video, get the captions on, etc. What question?
Just to be clear, you're only testing the drinking water, right? This is not about the creeks or anything of that nature?
Yes. Yes, our department is only testing drinking water.
Go ahead.
JD, the plan right now is to do a surface water discussion next week. So this is today's all about drinking water. Yeah.
And the second part of that was, are there chemicals that have been detected in people's drinking waters? And if so, which chemicals have been detected?
Yeah, thank you for that. I did mean to bring that up and then I skipped right over it. So we have had 4 exceedances, none related to the derailment. So the first exceedance that we had was a disinfectant byproduct because the resident had chlorinated their well, so it was related to the chlorine in the water. We resampled at that point after it's flushed out and it came back non-detect. The second exceedance was 2,6-dinitrotoluene. That ended up not being in the chemicals of concern, so that was an early test. We don't test for that any longer in our test, but we did retest for the resident and that came back non-detect as well. I'll say that disinfectant byproduct sample exceedance, both I think it was AECOM at the time, or Stantec, they had a similar result. This DNT one that I just spoke about, their result was not a detection, but ours was an exceedance, so those didn't match. When we retested it, it was a non-detect. Then recently we retested 2 that Stantec had exceedances and then we did not. One of them was a DNT, that dinitrotoluene again. Our result came back non-detect twice. The first time when they had a detection and the second time when we retested non-detect. And then the third one was a detection Stantec had of bis-2 ethyl hexylphthalate, an exceedance of that. Ours was non-detect both times for that. And I'll say that all of those, again, are no longer being tested for as a chemical of concern related to the derailment.
Okay.
I got a follow-up on that.
Sorry, we got a question on the back first. Okay. Then we'll get to you.
Okay, I just wanted to say, when you were going over your little diagram showing groundwater and aquifers and that sort of thing, and you said how groundwater typically doesn't get into, or surface water doesn't get into our groundwater because we have usually a clay lining. In East Palestine, our aquifer is not protected by a clay lining. In fact, in our quality reports, it always says that we are highly susceptible to contamination. 1, because we have a very shallow aquifer, and 2, because we don't have a protective lining, and we have a high number of potential contaminants, and that was before the derailment. So there was one image that I don't have, and it was a 1-year protection area and a 5-year protection area. And that was around the well. I don't have that. But that's where if you have contamination, if it's within this area, it would take 1 year to get to your wells, 5 years if it's in this area. So my question is, I know that they've done sentinel wells to test, and that's great, that's an early warning. Is there anything that can be done once it gets to the sentinel wells to keep it from getting to our municipal wells?
I can't, first off, yes, you're right. That was an overgeneralization of groundwater and surface water, and every area is a little bit different, so I completely agree with you on that. Sometimes they can interconnect, and sometimes there's sand that allows it to run right down, right? Second, I can't speak for the municipal water, I can only speak for our private wells. But what I can say from the private wells is that it's our intent to continue to sample those private wells. The way that the work plan is set up right now is that we're going to be sampling those every 30 days until the product has been removed from the site. So that would be the train, everything around the tracks, and then in the surface water. And at that point, the work plan is going to be readjusted. And it's our intent, because we expect residents to want their water sampled and make sure that they have safe drinking water. It's our intent for the health district to continue sampling. What that cadence is, I don't know yet, because we're gonna have to talk to experts in groundwater to see, like what you're saying, five year, like how long would it take for it to get in the aquifer? The other thing you have to consider with private wells is the construction and the depth, and all of those things are different. So having a sentinel wall network doesn't really work for private wells. Works good for municipal water supply, which again is Ohio EPA jurisdiction. They set up those sentinel wells for that as an early indicator. But our early indicator, as far as our department is concerned, is to continue to sample those water wells, and at the residents' discretion, if they're interested in being sampled. And if we start to see an increase, then we'll have to deal with it at that point, and that's when we have to bring in more experts to see what might need to be done.
So perhaps I missed, So perhaps I missed, this is specifically for private wells.
Yes, yeah, our department only has jurisdiction for the private drinking water wells.
Thank you for your question. Another question from the gentleman.
The hexaethyl palathate, if I'm saying it right, you say you're not testing for that anymore?
Yeah, that's not in the third analyte list, correct? Yeah, it's bis 2 ethyl hexylphthalate.
Okay, and when you did test for it, I think you said that it wasn't detected?
We've had detections of
Okay,
that,
okay,
and
yeah,
we have,
just
our
clear that up.
office has not had any exceedances of that. Stantec did have one exceedance recently of that.
As far as what the allowable amount is that should be in the
What's
water?
considered accepted would be in the water supply, yeah. And those are usually the Ohio EPA or the US EPA or the Agency for Toxic Substances and Diseases. They set those standards.
Okay, and would that be a breakdown of one of the chemicals that was on the derailment, or what is hexaethyl palathate?
Not that I understand. It's not related to the train derailment at all, from what I've been told by toxicologists, and I can't speak anymore to what it is.
It's got something to do with PVC piping, right? It's used in.
So, Russ, I'm also not familiar with where that potential contaminant might have come from. However, it's not a contaminant that we have seen through all the waste sampling and all the other sampling that we've done with the contaminants on site. So that's why it's not on the list. It could be from some other nearby industrial facility over time. And I think another important point is, we wouldn't expect to see groundwater impacts this soon, and that's that. But it's important, really important, to have a baseline. And the impressive amount of sampling that they've done on the private wells, and also what Ohio EPA has done with the municipal system and the Sentinel wells. The municipal system, to get to your question a little bit further, they're sampling those weekly still. The initial plan was to start weekly and then move to monthly, but they're still on the weekly posture. They're continuing that aggressive monitoring. And in they're going to install more Sentinel wells. That's the plan once all the work around the derailment site's finished. So
Are they thinking more Sentinels down 170 south?
I'd have to look at the state's plan. I just know that they are planning more. I don't know the exact locations.
So with the exahethyl palathate, if it hit and it was, one of them was at high level, and you guys are trying to obtain baseline, if that is something that is potentially dangerous, but possibly not related, why would you pull it from being read on a result? Why would that be withdrawn?
Well, again, so the 29 compounds that we're looking at now, Linda, are related to the train derailment site, okay? And so that's the focus moving forward. That particular sample, again, I don't know the details of it. That's something that, you know, we'd have to look a little closer into. We just want to make sure you have visibility on everything that we've seen so far. So.
And one more, zone 2, to the left, to the west. How far is that zone 2 going out? Like, I want to know if I'm in zone 2.
So zone 2 is the one that goes down to Negley. It's
It
not.
looks to me like we're in it, but I don't know how far west it
Yeah,
goes.
it's not really evident on this map. The original zone 1 and 2 map, you can actually see some of the road names. And if you want to get with me later, I can pull that up and we can look at it and see where your address is. The other thing that I'll add is that what we're testing for, that's fluid. You know, it's been informed by what we've seen in the air and in the groundwater sampling, but if we start to see something pop up, we could change this list again that we're sampling for.
No, we're gonna give a chance to somebody else to ask a question. Thank you.
I have 2 quick questions. So when you said that you guys would retest if you had a detection or it varied from Stantec, does Stantec retest their samples too, or just you guys?
Yeah, so the 2 exceedances that we recently retested last week were Stantec exceedances, and we co-sampled with them. The exceedance that we had for the disinfectant byproduct, that was a co-sample. The exceedance that we had that was on our side only of the DNT, I'll say, Stantec did not co-sample with us on that one. So it's our intent, anytime Stantec is sampling, we want to be sampling with them, assuming that it's in the priority zones.
And then when it comes to the private wells, and like the ground material or whatever, are you guys taking note as to like people's private wells, whether their soil is more sandy or clay or anything like that? Are you taking note like whether the contaminants would go faster through this person's property as compared to this person's property?
We're sampling at a 30-day cadence regardless of what the soil is like. We pull the well logs, which are on the Ohio Department of Natural Resources website or sometimes in our office, but usually definitely there. And we'll include that in the report to provide to the resident. But our
like
sampling,
how deep their well actually is and
yeah,
stuff.
if we have that information, but our sampling doesn't change dependent on that.
Thank you for your question. Oh,
Will your priority zone ever change from like 3 and 4? We're 5 houses out of East Palestine, out of the mile. We're 1.2. We have a well. I have called that number probably 4 times since the very beginning, and I'm always told that you're on the list. We'll put you on the list. I see your name on the list. I'm only 5 houses out of East Palestine. And I've been drinking bottled water and using bottled water for everything. Am I ever going to get checked?
We have changed the priority zones 3 times now, so it's a possibility. I don't know any future plans of that, and it's unfortunate, your situation, because you're so close, and I'm sure there are other residents that are in the same boat. What we can offer you is information from about a third-party lab and possibly getting a sample there. We can go over those results that you receive and let you know if it's
Will
safe.
Norfolk Southern pay for those tests then? Because I heard they were like $500.
Yeah, I can't speak for them, but you could go to the Family Assistance Center and ask for sure.
Okay.
thank you. Next question.
Hi, I received a message that you left on the 1st, and I'd like to let you hear it to see if you could help me with this. Sorry.
Hi, this is Haley Beach, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm calling to provide a quick update on your preliminary soil sampling results at your property. First, thank you again for granting access to sample soil on your property. The data are very important as far as our sampling efforts in and around East Palestine. I wanted to give you some preliminary sampling data, and results for your property show that the levels of some of the substances sampled for at your property are at or above the EPA screening levels, but these were all within the typical levels for urban and soils. The data are going to be released in the coming week, and you should receive a letter with the final results summarizing your property results. And this will include relevant information explaining the results. However, feel free to drop by the EPA Community Welcome Center at 25 North Market Street. I'll be happy to look at the data with you and answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, so that's from the soil sampling program.
Yes.
That came from our office. And
Yes.
I'm happy to talk with you afterwards.
Yes, I was wondering when they mail those, because it's been quite a while and I haven't got them.
Let's talk after. I'll give you the scoop on that. But I
Thank you.
wanted to keep this to the drinking water discussion at this
Yes.
point. Then we can move on to other subjects.
Yes, another question on the topic of water. Raise your hand as you will. Okay.
Hi, I have a question about the data collection process that's happening for the laboratory samples to be sent. So I know that it's a very specific process where we're gathering samples for analysis, but my question is, you said that part of what dictates what you're testing for is based on the data coming out of the air monitoring, the dirt monitoring. Why is that? Because why don't we have a list of target chemicals that we're testing for regardless in combination? Because what's happening at the site may or may not be exactly what's happening a little further from the site. Because as chemicals go through different phases, you know, it's not the same as having them buried in the dirt. So why are we using air sampling data to dictate what we're measuring in water? Shouldn't each sampling program sort of be a way to check the others and what they're finding? That's my question.
That's a great question. Thank you. So the target contaminant list is based on not just what we've seen in environmental media, but in the actual waste itself, okay? And so that's where you're gonna see the highest concentration of chemicals. In addition to that, you know, we know what was on the train when it derailed, and all the chemicals as part of that train derailment inventory it is part of those target compound lists. Okay, so it's a combination.
The original one or the 29 now?
29 now. It's part of the list of what we're seeing in the waste, and that's the primary driver. And it's also part of you know, what we knew was in the cars and what could be created from those compounds.
So of the original that you were testing, I forget the number, I can look back in my notes, 180 chemicals, now down to the 29. Have any of the ones that were dropped in any way been on that list of possible compounds? Did you drop any, in other words, because you weren't seeing that at the site, even though it's a possible combination from what was on the tree?
So the list of 180 was Laura explained it really well. We have basic analyte lists for environmental media.
Right.
Okay, that's what those 180 represented. As the response has gone on, we've evaluated all the environmental media, and we understand what compounds are present. And so now that we know what compounds are present, it could influence groundwater. We've established those priority compounds.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. Next question, front row.
Thank you for this opportunity. First, I'd like to thank everybody for having us here. I know it's a big sacrifice, long days, so thank you. It's really to follow up with her question. In the spirit of mutual respect and transparency, will you share with us the U.S. EPA study design and sampling plan that's directing these efforts? Will you share with us the plume model or any such model which informs such sampling plan and rationale for the sites that you have chosen to perform the air, water, and soil sampling? I have a second question as well.
Okay, so we'll talk about water. And then we can
But
talk.
it all correlates
Well,
together, correct?
We can talk about everything else after. I want to give everybody the opportunity to ask water questions first. Okay.
But
All right.
in order to have a your sampling plan, I'm asking for the model.
Right. So let's talk water first.
Okay.
And then we can, again, when everybody else has had an opportunity to ask water questions, then we can talk about everything else. Okay. So with respect to water, and today's topic is potable water or drinking water. This week, we posted the final potable water sampling plan on our website, so you can check that out. You can see what the changes that were made from the early days that Laura described to what we are currently doing. So that plan's been out there. You can see not only the compounds that we're looking at, but you can also see the detection levels, the reporting limits, the regulatory citations. Okay, so that's online. It's available now. The reason it wasn't available before this, you use the word transparency, is because it was a draft plan. It was provided to us by the company. We do not finalize those plans until they meet our requirements. So the back and forth plans, the draft plans going back and forth between us and the company are not posted. We post the plans when they're final, and that program is what's being implemented now.
And the company's Norfolk?
That's right. That's right.
What about the plume map?
Well, that's my second question is directly related to the water. In a letter dated April 12th, 2023 to U.S. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan from Dr. Andy Welton, noted several concerns he had with respect to the Stantec water testing results provided to the residents on behalf of Norfolk Southern. We still await those responses to those concerns. Some of the issues are as follows. Typical quality assurance and quality control data was not provided with the results, including the sampling protocol and chain of custody documents. The analytical method detection limit for 29 compounds was much higher than the regulatory standards listed in the table, rendering the information insufficient to make health decisions for the analyses if found in drinking water. These issues call into question the scientific validity and accuracy of the results and leaves the residents with concerns about the ability of Norfolk Southern and Stantec to properly sample, test, analyze, and report the results. Will you please share your responses to these concerns here this evening?
Certainly. With respect to the letter that you're referring to, we do have a draft response prepared. Again, it's one of those things where it probably would have been out the door already if we weren't so busy with the field work, so I hope you can appreciate that. Absolutely. But we do have a draft response prepared that's going to be going out the door. But with respect to the concerns, you mentioned, going piece by piece. You mentioned reporting limits, okay? So with the priority compounds that we're looking at now, 2 of those compounds, I believe it's 2, it might be 3, 2 of those compounds, the reporting limit, all right, is higher than the regulatory level. That was one of the key points in that letter. We get that. The detection level for that method is below those regulatory levels. Okay, so that's important. We'll be able to see it below the reporting limit, but it'll get flagged as an estimate. Okay, so we will be able to see detections at those regulatory levels for all of those priority compounds, and that goes to all the previous compounds which were priorities. Yeah, we can go back and look at those. Again, they're well within those ranges, so we're okay there.
It's fluid, right?
Yeah. What do you mean by
well,
fluid?
I mean everything it's still evolving. So you guys are like working through these issues, right?
Of course. You know what? And when we learn new information, it may change our program. Many of you have given us information that has changed some of the ways that we approach some of the aspects of the site. So, no, that absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you for your question. Raise your hand if you have questions about private water well. Back there.
Jamie.
Did you get the plume modeling done?
Yeah. All right. So, are you talking about the air plume, right?
Correct.
All right, let's hold that. I really want to keep this
But I
focused
think
on
that
water.
affects the water.
I-
I mean, where that plume went
All right,
and where they're testing.
I'll work with you on that. All right,
Thank you.
fair enough. Yes, we've had a plume, you know that. We talked about that at the soil sampling meeting 2 weeks ago. That was a product generated from one of our national labs, and they have to go through a clearance process to release anything to the public. I literally just yesterday got a message from them, and they told me that they're at one of the final steps to get that out the door. And if, I'll tell you, I'll make a commitment to you, if they can't push it out the door, we'll give you an estimate, we'll draw up an estimate as to what it looked like and what our decision-making process was on that. Because, you've asked for it for more than weeks, and so we owe you something, we get it, so it's coming.
Yeah, thank you. Next question.
So Mark, when you said, and I just want to get clarification, you said that you mentioned the company a couple of times, like you have to get clearance from the company, or they released information about the plume you got that from the company. Let's clarify that, because that's Norfolk Southern, so let's break up the snuggle fest between the EPA and Norfolk Southern, and you can, differentiate.
Okay.
When you say company, you're referring to Norfolk Southern.
So when I'm talking about the national labs, I'm not referring to
Right.
the company, which is Norfolk Southern. I say the company because when we write legal documents, that's how we write the legal documents. So it's just part of the way I talk because of the way I write. So I apologize for
Well,
that.
I guess what I misunderstood, and maybe I misunderstood. You said, when that gentleman up there was asking you some questions, that you said that it was released to you from the company, and then you shared it. Now, did I misunderstand that? Was that what was?
Oh, the work plan, yes.
Yeah.
So good question, Linda, my apologies. So we direct Norfolk Southern under our unilateral administrative order, which you shared with me in person.
For hours. Yes.
Yeah, for hours, yeah, that's right. Our unilateral order directs the company to develop an overall removal action work plan. So this action that we're taking falls under the Superfund removal program, all right? If it were a classic Superfund site, it'd be called a Superfund remedial program. This is under the Superfund, get rid of this, Superfund removal program. And so the overall removal work plan consists of roughly 15 parts, all right? The potable water plan, which we just talked about, is part of the roughly 15 plans that we have directed the company to produce, all right? So they produced the early versions of those plans in late February, early March. Even though we've been implementing the action in emergency style, we had to make sure we had plans in place for the long term to know what our targets were going to look like as this thing progresses, right? So Norfolk Southern has written these plans. They've provided them to us. We've kicked all of them back for comment, and slowly they have been approved. The soil sampling work plan was approved early, and we've already implemented the field part of that. We still got a lot of work to do on it, but the field part is done. The potable water plan was developed, and we finally approved it. And as Laura described, that's something that's going to be a work in progress for a long period of time. So, but yes, we direct the company that create the work plans. They give us drafts. We provide comments back. And we have that back and forth until we're satisfied that the work plan is appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you. We have another question on this side.
Why do they dictate the work plan first? Why don't you guys just tell them what to do?
So I think that's a nuance. It is actually not even them, the company, Norfolk Southern, that writes the work plan. It's their environmental contractors that write the work plan. Stantec wrote the work plan for the potable water sampling plan. Arcadis wrote the work plan for the soil testing. okay? Now,
Go
let me
ahead.
finish. So they write the work plan. They're competent environmental professionals, but we also know that you know, they are working for the company, for Norfolk Southern. So we're confident in their ability to write a competent work plan, but we need to make sure that the endpoints to this work plan meet the objectives that we set out. That's the order part. That's where we tell them what to do within the confines of our unilateral administrative order.
Couldn't you avoid all the back and forth though if you?
We could, but then your tax dollars are paying for that up front, and it's going to be years down the road before we get our money back.
But if it was a citizen, they wouldn't get the back and forth with you. You would just tell the citizen what to do, and a citizen would have to follow through. Like, we wouldn't get to negotiate if our oil tank leaked. You wouldn't be like able to say, well, you know, here's what we present to you, and we'd be like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We think this is a better idea,
So-
and you agree to that.
Let's compare apples to apples, Linda.
Yeah.
If it were an oil tank, we'd be under the Oil Pollution Act, and you're right. We'd write a notice of federal interest, we'd get that in your hands, and we'd direct you to order it, do it without a work plan. If you had, let's say you were collecting drums, hazardous waste drums from a company, they were paying you to dispose of them in your back 40, right? We would go through the exact same process with you as we are going through with Norfolk Southern. But your ability to pay probably wouldn't be quite as good as theirs. So we'd probably end up doing the cleanup and then going after the responsible party for whatever peanuts they could provide us. So
Again, questions about private water well testing, and then we move on to other topics.
I just wanted to add something real quick. As far as the potable water work plan, that is not just the US EPA, but our department has been involved in that, again, from the beginning, along with the Ohio EPA, the Ohio Department of Health, and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, along with the consultants from Norfolk. So that's been a group effort informing what's going to occur there.
All right, raise your hand.
That's
A question about this.
And that's an excellent point, Laura, because remember, EPA didn't issue that order until February 21st. So everything that happened before that was on the authority of the agencies that were taking the lead on this particular. Now we have umbrella oversight over this, and we're all in a unified command process working this together. Okay.
Okay.
Stantec is not a QA/QC lab. So how your own website says that it must be QA/QC lab. Stantec is not. I mentioned several issues with Stantec that weren't addressed, but that's the main one. I mean, am I right or wrong in saying this?
I honestly can't speak for Stantec's results, what lab they use. That's not, under what we're doing, co-sampling is trying to check their results, and we have our own lab, so I can put you in contact with Stantec, and you can get more information about their lab specifically, but I don't know.
Their results basically mean nothing. Without having QA or QC assurance.
Well, don't make that assumption. Actually, you asked that question earlier because you were going through the list of questions. I didn't address the QA/QC issue. So Stantec, I assume, sends it out to a private lab. They're not a lab; they're a consulting company. Yeah. So, they use Eurofins? Oh yeah, they're a quality lab. They're a high quality lab. I'm not concerned about those guys. You asked about QA/QC. One of the issues that you mentioned with the drinking water lab reports is there is no quality assurance reports attached to it, right?
Correct.
Those quality assurance reports are that thick, right? And they're extremely. You think that was hard to read? Wait till you see one of those. All right. And in those quality assurance reports, you have your chain of custodies, you have all your matrix spike information, and all everything that they do to validate the equipment that validates the sample result. All right. The results that Stantec is sending out are just the summary tables. Okay. And in the letter, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, that they, upon request, any resident can get their quality assurance report. Okay, but I don't think we're not gonna send out a report this thick every time.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. So next questions, I guess we'll open up to.
Are we opening up, or are we still on drinking water? Still on drinking water?
Well, it's sorta.
Sorta.
It
Okay.
has to do with
All right.
it has to do with the controlled burn in the plume. I know at one of our prior meetings, and it kind of reminded me when Linda asked you about they. You had said that the EPA had originally created a model for the controlled burn of one train car. And then you said they called on that Sunday night and said, we've changed it to 5. Can you just clarify who that they was? Was that Norfolk Southern who changed that to 5 rail cars, or was it our city government? Who is the they in that statement?
So I'll have to circle back with our on-scene coordinator who was on site that night to give you a better answer. We actually have a request from a reporter on that very question, and we're going to get back to them on that. But again, Jamie, our OSC can advise on that. Now, there was modeling done for this I do know, there was modeling done for the 5-car burn in advance of the 5-car burn, and that was coordinated through the Ohio National Guard. It wasn't coordinated through us.
Thank you for your question.
So, any more drinking water? Because we're starting to get off topic. So
This is about the drinking water again.
Okay.
My house, five houses away. When the burn happened, the original, we sat in our family room and we watched the black smoke going up over the lake, kind of going toward Pennsylvania. Now, how do I know that didn't come down into my water area?
So
I'm only 5 houses out of here and they won't check it.
yeah, no, I understand the frustration, and we've had other people that are outside of the priority zones express concerns about that as well. I guess the only thing I could tell you from just an overall coordination standpoint is at some point you have to set a boundary, right? And the only assurance I can give you as somebody who's consuming drinking water is that we're not seeing any contaminants in the drinking water wells, and we are exceptionally confident in the quality of the East Palestine municipal water as it relates to the train derailment. Again, we wouldn't expect to see problems with drinking water for years, okay? But that's why we're sampling aggressively now.
Well,
to
it
make
probably
sure
won't
it's not a
bother.
problem.
It probably won't bother me because I'm older. But how about my young great grandchildren, my son?
I agree with you, 100%. And that's why a long-term monitoring plan is important. If I were a resident here, the number one thing I'd be concerned about is the long-term health of my drinking water.
And how do I get
Absolutely.
it? How do I get it?
Well, yeah, you're actually getting it through all the sampling that's going on and the fact that we're not seeing any compounds in any of the wells related to this derailment. That's how you're getting that assurance. And again, again, where do you set that boundary? That's always a hard question, right? And so I apologize for your frustration.
Thank you.
Ma'am, if you give me your number after this, I'll make sure that you get your well tested.
Well, thank you for your question.
Since
Next
no one
question
else will,
on
I'll
the water
help you.
topic?
We'll get it tested.
Oh, sorry. On the side.
So I was, is this on? It is? Okay. So I was gonna ask a question on the well drinking water, but I can answer the question on the 5-car burn that you have, because I'm one of the attorneys that's one of the 4 leads on the federal class action, and I sat through the Pennsylvania hearings in the Darlington Fire Hall with their House of Representatives, and they had all this testimony that Norfolk Southern was the ones that decided that they were going to blow the other 4 cars. That's who the they was in that, and they were all upset over it. When they questioned them, they said they've had 200 years. This is the testimony that came out in the hearing. We've had 200 years of doing this, and we know better, and that's what we're gonna do. So that's why Pennsylvania's reps and all of them were upset over that. They didn't give them a reason why the other 4 cars needed to be blown.
It was cheaper than hauling it out properly. It was cheaper.
Yeah,
And
and
we'll
so
get, well, yeah.
you make a great point, and what I think the primary point is to take home from this is there are going to be investigations going on for a long time over this incident.
Yes,
So,
and both states are gonna push the investigations, especially Pennsylvania, in Ohio, I know. And the only other thing I had with drinking water was the private wells, which this was basically a baseline testing presentation tonight, because I think you all agree that, and we had a biochemical engineer named Steve Petty go around and do testing, He's done it for 35 years. He's, done a lot of these toxic spills and said that it's only gonna move through the aquifer approximately 2 feet a day. So it's gonna take a while before it's gonna show in the private wells, right? But at least you got a baseline to show, and then they'll monitor these for a long, long time because it's gonna take a while to show in the private wells, right?
Right, obviously residents were concerned going back into their homes, and they didn't know if their water was safe, so we know what's going on right now, regardless of what's going on with aquifers and how water moves. So I think it was important that we got out there and we tested right away and said, okay, here's what you've got in your water now. And then, it's a baseline, and it's our intent to continue to sample, and we hope to be able to maintain this program into the future for years to come.
Well, they'll probably be forced to pay for a program, so it is, sampled for a long time, since it does only move the 2 feet per day. But the other thing was, they left this lay on tracks 1 and 2 for 20-something days until the EPA forced them to take those tracks up, and they just started taking up track 2, so it's been there for months while it's been being pounded down through the ground by the vibrations of the trains running there for these 2 months, and all the weather with it too, right? But it was EPA that, I know they contend they did it on their own, but EPA forced them after 20-something days to take those tracks up, or they weren't taking them up.
It was part of our order, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. We have next question right here.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if the years for the contamination and the groundwater would be considering the mines underground too, and the lack of protective layer.
Yeah, you've asked that question before, and Z, you're one of the most thoughtful people that I've talked to through all of this. So I appreciate you. I haven't personally had the opportunity to talk to our folks about this dynamic yet, so I honestly just don't have an answer for you yet. But it is on my list of things to follow up on. So I apologize that I don't have anything for you yet. But keep asking the question.
Thank you. Next question.
So I have a question for Laura. It is, right? So you talked about opening up that to zone 3, the water concern, and that's kind of a newer zone that expanded out of the mile. So I want to know, specifically, what data caused you to explore that, expand that area out? Because you said you were seeing things. So I want to know specifically what data caused you to add zone concern 3.
That's actually part of the UAO through the US EPA. So that was the requirement for that expansion, and that's zone 4 as well, which is 250-foot buffer all the way down to the Ohio River.
You mean
But why wasn't it there in the beginning, is what I'm saying. What changed?
So our environmental, under our command structure, we have what we call an environmental unit, okay? And they're the really smart people that have to, look at all the science and evaluate what makes the most sense and what is most protective. So they, through their analysis, they determined that more geography was necessary. It really boiled down to their analysis. I can't speak any more to it because I wasn't part of that process. Just to know that they did the work.
I guess so the question is, why wasn't it like that in the beginning?
Why
did it change?
Because we were in emergency mode.
Okay.
Quite simply, we were in emergency mode, and let's draw a line 250 feet on. Was it 250 feet?
Yeah, so the initial 2 zones, we're looking at surface water running this direction, so we're looking at surface and groundwater, and so that's why we were focused this direction, and then this direction.
Because I understand with that third area, they were talking about upstream somewhat was added to that area. Is that right? From the derailment?
Yeah. So north of town, this part of that is upstream. Correct.
Right. I was just curious as to why that switch happened and why that wasn't done in the beginning. So thank you.
Yeah, and all I can say is it was an analysis done by our folks to be more complete. That's the best answer I could give you.
Thank you. Before our next question, it's a little past 7. We'll have time for a few more questions, but we have to be out of here by 8. So, thank you. Next question.
I was just piggybacking on that question. I was wondering too about these zones where you're testing, and this was, in regards to the woman saying she was only 5 houses out. If you don't have the plume map yet of where those contaminants went in the air, wouldn't that need to be taken into consideration when deciding where to test?
I can tell you generally where the plume map went. It went the primary dropout of contaminants went southeast, right? Then the wind shifted and went pretty much due northwest. But again, those particles from the burn, from the vent and burn, not from the initial burn. Those particles were very fine. Okay, and so any volatiles that were associated with those would have evaporated off pretty quickly. That's why with our soil sampling program, which helps inform on all of this, the soil sampling program is looking at semi-volatile organics and of course dioxins, but the semi-volatiles help inform on whether or not we have impacts in those areas. And again, the primary zone is to the southeast because that was the primary deposition zone. And then we do have what we consider to be background samples up north, which would be in that secondary.
And I don't know if you can answer the second part or not, but I just keep wondering why Norfolk Southern is using this 1 mile radius is a place as the radius for like temporary relocation and things of that nature, when everyone knows that was set up as an area in which the shrapnel would go, not the contamination. So, you're testing in other areas because you have concerns. So why isn't Norfolk Southern allowing people in those areas to temporarily relocate until we can be shown that it's safe to return home?
Good question. So there's two parts to that. One, the specifics of their relocation program, that's on them, right?
Right.
The reason we actually have a temporary relocation program is because we pushed the envelope to ask them to do that around the primary excavation zone, because we knew that there was a potential for unpleasant odors, there was a potential for vapor releases. We wanted to make sure that the communities right around that zone had the opportunity to do that. Through discussion, it was agreed upon to expand that zone through discussions with the city, the railroad, and to be within all the potential work zones where there was aeration going on in the rivers, along Sulphur Run and at the derailment site itself. So,
and that's what I'm a little confused on. As you said, you asked Norfolk Southern to do this temporary relocation, but it seems to me that they're just kind of doing it on a whim. They're giving different people relocation, and some of them outside the 1 mile, and I don't understand why that's not being directed by someone from the government as to these are potential areas of exposure. It almost seems like you guys have left Norfolk Southern play God. Like, this is literally our lives, and depending on who you get at that assistance center, depending on what mood they're in, and depending on how persistent you are, is what is determining whether or not you're awarded this temporary relocation. So why isn't that being directed in at least some kind of scientific nature, as opposed to, here you go? At this point, we don't know who's the most at risk. The testing hasn't been done. Is it the people in Negley where that water runs downhill? Is it people like myself that live next to Sulphur Run? Or is it people in that 1 mile zone, Pennsylvania? Like, we don't know. So why is it the EPA or, another government agency kind of directing Norfolk Southern as to relocation based on potential exposure?
So with respect to the work zones, again, this was all established with respect to the work zones, okay? So, because we have, as we talked about last week, we have a really impressive air monitoring and air sampling system around the derailment site. And we are certain that we are not putting vapors into the air that are above levels of health risk. We're absolutely certain about that. The agreement with the company was specific to inconvenience, nuisance, potential for odors, potential for dust coming off the support zones. We wanted the residents around that primary work zone to have an option, to have it be their choice. Outside of that primary work zone, we don't have any data that suggests that there are hazards in this community other than the creeks. The creeks, Sulphur Run's contaminated. The upper portion of Leslie Run is contaminated. We'll talk about that next week at our next session. And we can get more into that, into those details.
So are people along the creeks also entitled to this temporary relocation?
According to the map that I saw way back when, yes.
Yeah, so before we move to the next question, please, just one
No,
question
not.
per person. And so we give a chance to anybody who hasn't asked a question. Next one.
Hello. I'm sure that you've heard that I wanted to meet you on Monday. I went into your welcome center with my test that I tested positive for vinyl chloride at a higher dose than anybody had seen at that time, of 0.94. I had asked, my request was for you to call a vinyl chloride manufacturer plant, ask for the safety department, and ask what their protocol is when a worker is exposed at work. If there's medication they have to take, what they have to do to get that out of that worker's system. I waited a day and a half, and then I got a call, and I can play that message too, but it refers me to go over to the clinic. That is not at all what I wanted. I will seek medical attention on my own for that. I asked, please call and talk to them. You're not used to dealing with this. None of us ever dreamt we would. But when one of us come up with an idea or a game plan, they're not going to talk to a normal citizen. I have the number right here of one that was not on that train. They're not legally, oh, we can't answer, it was our product on your train. No, I have one in my phone that I am desperately trying to get them to talk to me. I will give you the number. Will you please make a commitment to me and everybody else in this room that has that in their urine, that you will call them tomorrow and you will try for us? Could you do that, please?
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the vinyl chloride issue. And before I do that, there were three updates that I wanted to talk, because we're doing these weekly meetings and you have proposed questions to us, right? And one of the things that I think we have a responsibility to do is to follow up on your questions. So last week, and this will be the third question, so I will address it. Last week, there were three primary issues that came up that we really couldn't answer. One was from Jake and Reverend Barry. They were concerned about vinyl chloride being, similar to your issue, whether or not vinyl chloride was getting away from the site through, going up in the air early in the day and then dropping down at night. That was the question. We did follow up on that. Had a long discussion with Reverend Barry a couple days later, and talked to our operations staff, talked to our science staff. And with vinyl chloride, it's a dense substance. All right, it's got a greater vapor density in air. Oh, you are here. So vapor density, because of that vapor density, it's gonna hang lower to the ground typically, right? If it were to elevate during the day, it's going to burn off, right? That's what volatile organic chemicals do. So we know that. But the question was, what about monitoring and sampling away from that initial area? And so we went back, looked at our sampling program, and it actually turns out we did have two monitoring stations very close to his house up north, up 170, close to 170. And we also had a badge sampling station even further past his house. So we actually do have coverage up that way. So that was one follow-up. The second follow-up was Maggie. She owned the business where the creek goes underneath the building, and she basically had to relocate and close her business at least temporarily. So
merchandise was deemed contaminated.
So we've hooked her up with our operations staff, to do more investigative work.
And it goes under that whole plaza, not just her business.
Yep. And so we've done that follow up. So I just, again, just to let you know, we are following up. The third was vinyl chloride. So the question with vinyl chloride was, the question that some of you have who have had testing done, right? Have the urine test done, and it was always strange to me, not being a health professional. Why are we seeing vinyl chloride or benzene? Shelby mentioned that she had benzene in her urine, right?
A couple people have.
Yeah, and so I'm like, how, that's just, if you have vinyl chloride or benzene in your urine, that, how are you even living?
To do with the train.
How are you even living it? And it turns out it's not vinyl chloride and benzene, it's the metabolites that are actually being tested for, the thiodiglycol.
Thiodiglycolic acid.
That, yeah.
Which occurs
Yeah.
after the vinyl chloride
So-
is processed through
Yeah.
the system.
So we've been doing some more digging into that, and I think at the end of the day, I think what would be helpful to you all is to have one of these information sessions on public health, right? Right? Because as I've dug into it more, I'm getting the same information that the medical community has been sharing with you.
That's not.
Well, let me tell you what I know, okay, and then let me tell you how that relates to our work, because that's what we're here to report.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the medical community has been sharing with you guys, because you guys have it. But my medical community is sharing zero information with me. And that is the Ohio Department of Health, who actually brought in a toxicologist to talk to me and left me with zero answers.
Right.
Zero.
Okay.
I got zero.
So, well, hold on. Let me walk through this, and then we can have a
Mark,
discussion.
I'm not leaning on you for this because
I
you're not a
understand.
medical expert.
Right, I'm not.
I'm just asking you to call the company and see if they'll tell you something.
Well, hold that thought, because so with this metabolite, right? And I know you've heard this before, and I know you don't want to hear it again. But with this metabolite, there are several other chemicals. There are several lifestyle products that can create this chemical, right? And so as I've looked into it, I saw two things that I consume, right? I drink alcohol, and I consume vitamin B12. And those are two things.
I don't.
But we gotta trust your test.
Not just.
We gotta trust the EPA.
We gotta believe
Hold on,
every EPA
hold on, hold on,
test
hold
is
on.
gold,
Let
and
me-
ours gets debunked.
Right, let me go through this, all right? So, so we know that that is not a preferred test for this type of exposure unless it's an acute exposure, all right? And the only potential time there may have been an acute exposure would have been the night of the derailment, okay? And 3 to 6 hours, once that derailment happened, the air monitoring teams got on site. And we have an impressive amount of monitoring and sampling data that shows that at least after the first several hours, we didn't see a large acute amount of vinyl chloride getting into the neighborhoods. Now, it doesn't mean that you weren't exposed. We wouldn't try to kid you on something like that.
Did you have some
We
leakage?
know, we know that there were releases. There were absolutely releases, right? And we know that the monitoring network that was set up at the time was not nearly as impressive as it is now. We know that. So was there a potential for exposure? Certainly. Anybody that lived down close to that or was downwind of that could have potentially been exposed to not only vinyl chloride, but some of the other contaminants that were involved in a train derailment. Absolutely.
Will you
Right?
get checked by my doctor for your
So-
urine with it?
So,
Would you do that if you can't call the
So
manufacturer?
hold on. So again, you have to understand the limitations of the test, right? We have to also understand that it requires an acute exposure. The impressive monitoring sampling network that we have on site now does not show, not only does it not show an acute exposure, it doesn't even show an intermediate level exposure. The levels that we're coming back when we do get a vinyl chloride detection are down below a part per billion, all right?
Is it storm drains you mentioned?
All right, so, hold on, again, let me finish, and then we can talk about this. And then, so finally, again, I think it would be valuable on this issue to have a public health information session. So we'll look into doing that, seeing when we can do it. I know that remember the assessment of chemical exposure survey that was done by TSDR way back in February, March. I think they're getting close to releasing their report. So, that could tie in nicely, with this type of discussion. So, again, I just, want to make you understand that there are reasons that A, that test isn't recommended, and B, that we don't have.
the
well,
ATSDR document regarding
hold on.
vinyl chloride testing. I can read it word for you if you
And,
would like.
right, well, hold on, and we don't see any evidence of acute exposure, and I think that's really important, okay? So, so along those lines, next steps, see if we can have a discussion, on this topic, right?
Is that a no then?
Mark?
To me, you're not gonna
I
contact?
think we only got time for like 2 more questions.
Okay, and so, no,
Informed
no,
answer.
no, she asked for an answer, and I don't see a reason why we would do that, okay? And that's,
Because Chrissy tested positive, because Jake tested positive, or get someone Linda, or get someone from the
Yep.
CDC down here. And when you're saying that contaminated soil is actively exposing us to gases, those aren't from vinyl chloride at all?
not at those levels, not at acute levels, and that's what's important. Any vapors that are being generated
What's
from that
considered
site.
a acute level?
Initially, in the emergency phase, over 500 parts per billion. In the after about a week, we dropped that to 50 parts per billion. Now it's down to 20 parts per billion. The levels that we're seeing are off-site are below 1 part per billion.
But do the continued exposure, do you account for that? And do you account for that exposure being mixed with other chemicals?
Right.
Because I know you're saying like some common products can, cause these things in your urine, but I know my brother, talked to some doctors who said, for cigarettes to make the amount of vinyl chloride show up in his urine that showed up,
Yeah.
he had to smoke 20 packs a day.
So-
Couldn't
Don't
even-
36 gallons.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it, and that's, Jamie, that's why.
You said it's up in the air and it goes away. How about our storm drains? Has anybody checked them?
So-
We're figuring out somewhere along the line we're being exposed.
Yeah, I'll take that back. I'll take that back, Thomas. But again, what's important here is we're not seeing. We have the site. We know it's contaminated still, right? It's the speed of the cleanup has really picked up. Just about all the.
Make sure they're not slacking, and that's why they're speeding.
Yeah.
They haven't done the burn pit yet, right? They haven't cleaned.
We haven't touched the pit yet. You're
So
right.
the best is yet to come.
You're right.
So then when we get vinyl chloride,
So-
it'll be because we're all smoking a carton a day, right?
So and so you have contamination over here.
And having campfires and
You have-
barbecues.
Yeah, you have individuals over here. We're not completing that exposure pathway. And again, so I think it would be valuable for you all to to have that open conversation about public health. So, yeah.
So one more question. Final question on the line.
Okay. I came,
It's on.
okay, I came here to talk about well water. I mean, I can understand that we're getting off, but it's like 2 or 3 people are enjoying the room, okay? It'd be nice to have a clearer map, maybe with roads, streets, so you knew exactly where you live, should I have my well water tested.
No, that's so that is a good piece of advice. So
Right.
we'll take that back. We'll take Jake's comment back to our folks, and yeah. All right.
Right, well, thank you everyone, and that's all the time we got for today. We appreciate you coming, and we'll see everyone on next week's information session.